This video will show you how to replace your front lower ball joint on this Toyota Corolla. This is part of the front steering and suspension located behind your front wheel. Let's get into it. Okay friend, let's get started on our job. The first thing we have to do is safely raise and support the front of the vehicle so the front wheel's off the ground. After you've done that, we're going to remove all 5 of our 21mm lug nuts and then the wheel. Now that we have the wheel off, we're going to be focusing on the axle nut. The reason why we're focusing on the axle nut first is because it's going to make it easiest to be able to gain access to the ball joint mounting nut. I'm using a 30mm 12-point socket for my axle nut. Now we're going to break this free. I'm using a hammer and punch directly in the center of the axle. Let's get some movement. Once you do see movement from here, we can continue on. Now we're making our way underneath the lower control arm. We're looking for where the ball joint connects to the control arm. In this area, you're going to find 3 pieces of 17mm hardware. We have a bolt and 2 nuts. Start with the bolt. Onto each of the 2 nuts. At this point, you should be able to pull down on the control arm. We want to pull it down far enough that we can remove the ball joint studs. Now we should be able to start pulling this out and away. We're pulling the axle shaft out of the back side of the wheel bearing. Now we can focus on the ball joint mounting nut. This is the reason why we remove the axle from this area, so we can more easily gain access. There's typically a cotter pin of some sort. This one looks like it's very rusted. Let's see if I can work it out of here, but typically it's just going to break. We'll just trim that off of there. Now we can remove our 19mm mounting nut. I'm using a swivel socket and an extension. There's that. We're just going to start it back on there a couple threads. Now we're going to start separating this ball joint from the steering knuckle. To do that, you could try using a pickle fork, but you don't want to damage the backing plate. If that's the only option you have, just be extremely careful. I'm going to start tapping along the top of this area. You can use a hammer if necessary. I have an air hammer, so I'm going to use that. And we can get this nut off of here. There it is, friend. Let's make sure we clean the mounting area. We'll start with the steering knuckle. Just be careful for any metal burrs. Moving along, lower control arm. It's time to install the brand new lower ball joint. Let's start with this lower mounting nut. Once you have that mounting nut started on, snug it up. The torque for that is 76 foot-pounds. Once you've torqued the ball joint nut, the next thing we need to do is pay attention to the slots on the castle nut in comparison to the port on the stud of the ball joint. We need to install our locking cotter pin. If it's not aligned, continue tightening until the very next slot is. After that, install that cotter pin. We have our cotter pin. You can see the ports lined up. Slide it through, pin it over. Let's take hold of the caliper area here. We're going to start pulling this away so we can bring the axle into position along the back side of the bearing. Should be able to twist the bearing as necessary. We'll get the splines aligned. It can only go so far. Now we need to also align the lower ball joint with the control arm before we go too much further here. Just going to pivot that ball joint. Bring this down, slide it into place. Be careful for any pinch points. Start installing our hardware here. Let's get that one onto my socket. For this mounting hardware, as we start snugging, we're going to be using an 18mm for our 2 mounting nuts and a 15mm for the bolt. The torque for all of these will be 66 foot-pounds. There's one. Now it's time for the axle nut. Of course, we're going to start it on by hand. We'll bottom this out. The torque for this is going to be 156 foot-pounds. When you go to torque this, you may find that this spins on you. Now, if that's the case, you could have a second person pressing on the brake while you go ahead and torque this. Otherwise, if you don't have a second person, you could use a pry bar diagonally down towards the ground, preventing this from turning. For now, I'm going to snug this up. For this, we're not using an impact tool. It's time to torque the axle nut. I have my bar going across my lug studs down towards the ground, preventing this from spinning on me. We'll be torquing this to 156 foot-pounds. Now, if you were looking at the axle shaft itself, you're going to find that it has a slot making its way all the way in. We want to try to drive that nut into the slot, so I'm just using a hammer and punch. We'll give this a couple taps. You can go as far as you feel necessary. Essentially, we just want to make sure the nut does not loosen while we're driving down the road. Let's get our wheel in place. Now at this point, we're going to start on all 5 of our 21mm lug nuts. We'll bottom them out, get the wheel safely on the ground, and we can torque these to 76 foot-pounds. With the wheel back on the ground, let's torque each one of our 21mm lug nuts to 76 foot-pounds. Torqued. Okay, friend, we finished our installation. Go ahead and take your vehicle for a road test, listen for any odd noises, and get yourself safely down to your local alignment shop. Thanks for watching.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.